Okay, so welcome to the A1 Elite Speed Equation. I'm just going to take you through how I break down speed, all the little bits behind it, exactly all the decisions that I go through when designing a program and everything. So, to start off with, one thing that I think is lost a lot in translation is that speed, sprinting speed, agility, all of it is just horizontal power. That is all speed is. It's not some magical forces. You don't need to push in a particular way. Whoever produces the most horizontal force is therefore the fastest. That's just how it works. It's physics. You can't, there's no magical, if you push vertical, you run faster. Now, I'm going to talk through exactly what you can do to push in a better, to have good technique or whatever you want to call it. However, I have my own reservations about that. So here we go. So speed is stride length and stride rate. As a human, we go from leg to leg. It's how we operate. If you have a particular stride length and you increase how many steps you take, the amount of horizontal impulses you're putting into the ground increases, therefore you run faster. Likewise, if you have the same stride rate but you take longer strides, you run faster. When it comes to making training decisions, we can look at stride length as a component of if the amount of time you spend on the floor, you have a portion where you're braking because you need to produce vertical force to stay upright, otherwise you're just going to collapse and fall over, and a portion where you produce horizontal force, propulsive force. This propulsive force, maximizing this and minimizing this, leads to a longer stride length. Stride rate is simply the amount of time in the air, and the amount of time on the floor. You minimize those or reduce them, then all of a sudden you run faster. So how that actually looks in the stride cycle is, here's ground contact, here is air time. We're just focusing on one side. Your foot lands in front of you or directly underneath you. You produce vertical force. Great. Your foot then goes behind you. Now you can more easily produce horizontal force. This contributes to the stride length. We come to the air time. We have, once you finish your drive, your recovery, that uses your hip flexor to pull your leg forward, and then your leg goes out, you catch it back with your hamstring, and then you're driving towards the ground again to then produce that horizontal force again. So if you look at the stride cycle as simply as that, our goal is to minimize the angle of the braking force, maximize the angle of the propulsive force, increase the speed of this recovery, and increase the speed of that recovery. Is that hard? Is that complicated? I don't think so. Speed is not that complicated. But you can see that, yes, technique is going to be a big part of that, but more important than that is to have the physical components that lead to that. So what's going to actually help reduce that front side shin angle? I'll start with the braking forces because we need to minimize them first and foremost, and it's the easiest. Because propulsive force has a big, if you're built for it, you don't need to manage your braking forces. You can produce so much propulsive force, it doesn't matter. Those guys end up in the 100-meter finals. They've just got the perfect muscle makeup, bone structure, tendon build, tendon structure, I guess, to produce lots of propulsive force. However, how they develop and how every athlete develops is minimizing braking force. How we can do that is by reducing this front side shin angle. So imagine your foot is all the way out in front over here. I don't know if you can see the mouse, or very far in front of the body. You're going to end up with a very large braking force because you're too weak to have your foot directly underneath you and produce the necessary vertical force. How that looks like is in this picture here, which is by Derek Hansen, nice infographic. If you are like this red dude and your foot's all the way out in front, you're going to produce more braking force. The angle from your hips to the floor is steeper. If you wanted to stop, if you wanted to break down, you're going to put your foot in front of you just like that. So that is how you can minimize that braking force, is by bringing that foot closer. Okay? However, this would mean having more of a midfoot or forefoot contact. Okay, instead of imagining it out in front, imagine you have a forefoot contact directly under the body. That's going to minimize this angle So how the hell do you get your foot back closer underneath your body? Well, you need to be strong enough. You need to be able to produce the force instead of landing on your rear foot because your calf and ankle isn't strong enough. You need to strengthen those muscles either through isometrics or training, just strength training, to be honest, doesn't need to be that complicated, and practice doing elastic movements to improve your reactive strength index. If you do that, you will reduce your braking force and therefore increase your stride length. Less braking force, same propulsive force, longer stride. Any questions? No, because it's simple. Next is the propulsive force. If we can improve that, again, stride length goes up and it's a little bit easier to do. So that would mean this portion here, this drive phase. Now you can see here, the further back you can get your leg, the more horizontal force you're going to be able to produce. So that comes also down to your shin angle, because if you have a rear foot contact here and your foot's really far in front of your body, you're not going to produce very good horizontal force, because it's going to take a long time to get your hip over your knee, over your toe, to then be able to push in this angle here. So if we can improve your vertical force, that's going to also in turn allow you, it'll kind of transfer on in the stride cycle where you're in a better position to then push more horizontally. So if we can push better horizontally, if we can hit those angles, great. However, that involves a large degree of hip mobility as well. So if we follow that from propulsive force, we come to backside shin angle, we go to hip mobility. So on ground contact, yes, you will, if you can produce more vertical force using the correct posture, yes, you'll start producing horizontal force earlier, but you'll produce even more horizontal force later in the stride cycle by having the necessary hip mobility, good glute activation, and good gastroc power, because there's two components of the calf, one for horizontal force and one for vertical force. So there you go. We've covered how we can improve your stride length quite simply, or how I manage that with my 40-yard dash training alongside all of my clients, I guess you could call them, athletes. And by just focusing on these simple components, it looks complicated, but really you're just addressing hip mobility and your reactive strength. Those two things will improve your stride length in the long term. When we come to stride rate, which is the backside and frontside recovery, all we're trying to do is minimize the ground contact time and that's the whole thing. Minimize the ground contact time and air time. So some things we do to improve our stride length are also in turn going to improve our ground contact time. If we reduce how long our foot is on the floor by increasing our hip height, by being more reactive, that then allows us to not spend as much time on the floor. So that's one way to reduce the ground contact time. By reducing that angle where we produce braking force, we can then minimize how long you spend in the front with your foot in front of your body, right? So we minimize, like instead of landing all the way out here on your heel, you just bring your foot closer. All of a sudden this distance is smaller. You're going to spend less time there. Less ground contact time. Super simple. Okay? Similar thing with the drive phase. If you have more power through your glutes and your gastroc, you push off quicker. So that's going to reduce the ground contact time. So when recovering the leg from the back side of the body, that's going to use your hip flexors. If you make them stronger, your leg comes in front of you quicker. Less air time. And same again, when your leg's coming down to attack the ground, or your foot's coming down to attack the ground, that's going to utilize your hamstrings to kind of catch your shin and throw it back towards the ground. We can see a little bit about that here. Again, Derek Hansen's infographics are just beautiful. Shout out to the guy. He loves yellow. I don't know why. So if you want to reduce your air time, all you do is get stronger hip flexors at both long and short length, and stronger hamstrings. That's going to help you be able to turn over your legs quicker. However, if you have the inhibition from not being strong enough, you don't have enough reactive strength in your foot, your body is not going to say, look, let me throw this leg at the ground and recover faster. So it's all interlinked, even though we have all the requisite parts. But those are the things you need to work on if you want to get faster. Now, my situation was when I started that I was running something like a 5.340, and I remember going to the park thinking I've never done sprinting before, and I run like a 1.47 10-meter fly. Now, that's just numbers, but that's shocking. That's like almost a 6-second 40-yard dash. That was my first sprint session. I wasn't even aiming for that. I just wanted to start sprinting, wanted to get faster. Fast forward to the future, my fastest was 1.05 in a 10-meter fly, which ended up as about 4.78. So all I did to address that was just following this same concept, where I improved my stride length by getting my calves stronger, quads stronger, and improving my hip mobility. In turn, improve my stride rate by just getting the meatiest hamstrings, alongside getting my hip flexors and rectus femoris as strong as possible using specific exercises. And that allowed me to get that time down, and that's how I'm going to hit 4.4. So hopefully you find this helpful in understanding how I make decisions about where you possibly could be going wrong. If you're still not 100% sure about some of the things I'm saying, because I have tried to cover a lot here, it's a real top-down view of everything, so I haven't covered everything in depth. But if you have specific questions, just ask me. Like, it's not a magical barrier between you getting help and not. Just ask me. I'm here to help. All right? But my G's, bless up.